The Cosmic Horror Commission studies why humans voluntarily experience terror for fun. Part 1. Commissioner stared at the data stream with growing horror. The images coming from the newly contacted planet Earth made no sense. Beings that called themselves humans were screaming. Not screaming in pain from torture or attack, but screaming while their faces showed something the translation software labeled as enjoyment. Belonged to the empathic collective, a species that had evolved on a peaceful world with no predators and gentle weather. Their entire civilization was built around avoiding stress and maintaining calm. Even a slightly raised voice could cause one of them physical pain. The idea that any intelligent species would seek out fear was beyond comprehension. "Play the recording again," said quietly to their assistant. The screen filled with images of humans sitting in darkness watching projected images. The images showed creatures with sharp teeth, scenarios of danger and impossible situations. The humans watching these images grabbed onto each other, hid their eyes and screamed. Yet when the lights came on, they were smiling, laughing. Some even said they wanted to experience it again. "This is clearly a medical emergency," announced to the Galactic Psychological Safety Commission during the next meeting. "An entire species appears to be suffering from some form of mass psychological disorder. They're deliberately exposing themselves to fear and calling it entertainment." The commission chamber fell silent. Representatives from 40 different species looked at the evidence with similar confusion and concern. Doctor, a crystalline being who experienced only mathematical satisfaction and logical pleasure, adjusted their translation field. "Perhaps the humans don't understand what fear is. Maybe their emotion processing system is damaged." "Impossible," chirped, "and species whose people solved problems through pure logic. Our linguistic analysis confirms they understand the concept perfectly. They have over 200 words in their primary languages specifically about fear and terror. They know exactly what they're doing." Soft Whisper, a telepathic being whose species nearly went extinct from a single planetary thunderstorm's psychological impact, shuddered visibly. "I've read the emotional resonance data from the surface scans. The fear is real. It's not simulated or misunderstood. These humans are genuinely terrified, and then afterward they feel something our equipment registers as satisfaction and pleasure." "This is worse than we thought," said. "We need to send an investigation team immediately. If an entire species is trapped in some cycle of self-inflicted psychological harm, we have a responsibility to help them." The commission voted unanimously to approve an emergency intervention mission. 3 weeks later, the investigation team arrived in Earth's orbit, had assembled what they considered the best minds in galactic psychology, would analyze the logical patterns. Doctor would examine the structural and systemic aspects. Soft Whisper would read the emotional reality, and would coordinate and ensure proper protocols were followed. "Initial scan shows the phenomenon is planet-wide," reported from the ship's analysis station. "Every continent, every population center, humans are engaging in fear-based activities voluntarily." "What kind of activities?" asked. "They have buildings specifically designed to frighten visitors, devices that drop humans from great heights at dangerous speeds, literature and art focused on scary scenarios, entire industries devoted to creating and distributing fear experiences." Antenna twitched, which indicated confusion in their species. "And they pay currency for these experiences. They trade resources to be frightened." Doctor calculated rapidly. "The economic data suggests this fear industry generates billions of their currency units annually. This isn't a small subset of the population. This is mainstream behavior." "We need to go down there," decided. "We need to observe this firsthand." The team picked a landing date based on activity patterns. The scanners showed that fear-based entertainment increased during certain times of the Earth year. They chose to arrive during what humans called October because the activity reached its peak then. Their first observation post was established near a building humans called a cinema. Through careful monitoring of local communications, the team learned this particular cinema was showing something called a horror movie marathon. The translation software indicated horror meant something that caused fear and terror. Why would they marathon it? Soft Whisper asked. That suggests extended exposure. Prolonged fear contact would cause permanent psychological damage to most species. Perhaps they're forced to attend, suggested Doctor, some form of social control or punishment. But observation proved otherwise. Humans arrived in groups, chatting and laughing. They purchased food items called popcorn and candy. They chose their seats carefully as if preparing for something enjoyable. Children attended with parents. Romantic pairs held hands. Friends arrived in excited groups. The investigation team watched from their hidden observation position as the first film began. The cinema darkened. Humans settled in their seats. Then the screen filled with images designed to terrify. What happened next confused every member of the team. The humans did react with fear. Their heart rates increased, which the scanners detected easily. They grabbed each other, jumped in their seats, and made sounds of distress. But between these moments, they smiled. They whispered to each other. When something particularly frightening happened, some humans laughed. This makes no sense, stated flatly. Their fear response is genuine, but their behavioral patterns suggest enjoyment. These two states should not coexist. The film continued for nearly 2 hours. Twice, had to leave the observation area because the second-hand emotional readings were too intense. Even knowing the humans weren't in real danger, the commissioner couldn't handle the levels of fear being broadcast. When the film ended and lights returned, the investigation team watched carefully for signs of trauma. They expected to see humans who were shaken, perhaps requiring medical attention or psychological counseling. Instead, the humans stood up, stretched, and started talking enthusiastically about what they'd just seen. That part where the creature came through the wall was amazing. I jumped so hard I spilled my drink. The ending was perfect. I didn't see it coming at all. Want to stay for the next one? It's supposed to be even scarier. The team recorded everything in stunned silence. They want to experience more fear. Soft Whisper's mental voice was barely a whisper. They enjoyed that and want additional exposure. As the humans filed out of the cinema, the team followed a group of 4 young adults. The conversation continued outside. That was so good. I was legitimately scared during the basement scene, one human said. Same, my heart was pounding, another replied, smiling widely. We should do the haunted house next weekend. You know, the one everyone says is super intense. Yes, I heard someone actually fainted there last year. It's supposed to be terrifying. They said this with excitement, with anticipation, as if fainting from fear was a positive recommendation. Called an emergency team, meeting back at the ship. What we're seeing is unprecedented, the commissioner began. Every theory we had is wrong. These humans aren't being forced. They aren't confused about fear. They aren't damaged. They're choosing this, seeking it out, and enjoying it. The psychological readings are clear, Soft Whisper confirmed. During the fear experience, they're genuinely afraid, but immediately after, they experience what our equipment registers as satisfaction, accomplishment, and happiness. The fear itself seems to create the positive emotions. How is that possible? Doctor asked. Fear is a survival response. It's meant to push organisms away from danger. Using it for pleasure violates basic psychological principles. Had been reviewing data quietly. I've analyzed historical records from their planet. This behavior isn't new. Humans have been telling each other frightening stories for thousands of their years. Before they had cinema, they gathered around fires and deliberately scared each other with tales of monsters and danger. This is deeply embedded in their culture. So it's not a recent disorder, said slowly. This is fundamental to how humans function. It appears so, confirmed. The team sat in silence, processing this information. Our report to the Commission should recommend immediate intervention, Doctor finally said. Even if this behavior is cultural, it's clearly harmful. We need to help them understand they don't need to live this way. But wasn't certain anymore. Something about the humans' behavior nagged at them. The humans hadn't seemed damaged or distressed after their fear experience. They'd seemed energized, bonded to their companions, and eager for more. Before we recommend intervention, said carefully, I think we need to understand this better. We need to experience it ourselves. The rest of the team stared at their commissioner in shock. You want us to voluntarily subject ourselves to human fear entertainment? Soft Whisper asked, their mental voice filled with disbelief. How else can we truly understand it? Replied. We're scientists. We observe, we gather data, and when necessary, we experience things firsthand. If we're going to tell the Commission that humanity needs help, we need to be absolutely certain we understand what we're seeing. None of them looked happy about this plan. There's one other thing, added quietly. I've been monitoring human communications globally. This fear-seeking behavior isn't limited to passive entertainment. They have activities called extreme sports where they throw themselves off mountains and cliffs with only fabric to slow their fall. They ride devices specifically designed to simulate danger. Some humans pay significant amounts of currency to jump out of aircraft in flight. They jump out of functional aircraft, Doctor asked, while the aircraft is flying on purpose. On purpose, confirmed, and they describe it as fun. Made a decision. Tomorrow we start field work. We're going to experience what humans call a haunted house. We're going to understand this, one way or another. The team spent the rest of the night preparing medical equipment, psychological support protocols, and emergency evacuation procedures. None of them slept well. They were scientists venturing into territory no galactic species had explored before, deliberately choosing fear. Part 2. The haunted house stood at the edge of town, a large building decorated with images of creatures and scenarios designed to frighten. A line of humans waited outside, chatting and laughing as if they weren't about to walk into a place literally named for terror. The investigation team watched from their vehicle, which was cloaked to appear as a normal human transport. Vital signs? Asked. Elevated across the team, reported. We haven't even entered yet, and our stress indicators are already higher than recommended levels. We're scientists, reminded them. We can do this. They joined the line of humans. Their disguise technology made them appear human, though maintaining the disguises required concentration. The humans around them seemed completely relaxed despite knowing what waited inside. A young human woman in front of them turned around with a friendly smile. First time here? Yes, answered carefully, still adjusting to speaking through the disguise's vocal system. Oh, you're going to love it. They completely redesigned it this year. My friend went through last week and said she screamed so hard she lost her voice. The woman said this with pride and excitement. That sounds good, tried. It's the best. Last year was scary, but this year is supposed to be next level. I've been waiting months for this. She turned back around, practically bouncing with anticipation. She's excited to lose her voice from screaming, Soft Whisper observed through their private communication link. How can that be right? The line moved forward. The team reached the entrance, where a human dressed as some sort of undead creature took their payment and explained the rules. No touching the actors. Emergency exits were marked. If anyone needed to leave immediately, they should use the safe word mercy. There's a safe word, Doctor noted. That implies humans recognize this could become too intense even for them. They entered the first corridor. The door closed behind them with a heavy thud. Darkness surrounded them, broken only by dim, flickering lights that created moving shadows. first instinct was to turn around and leave. Every evolutionary instinct their species possessed screamed that this was wrong, that darkness and enclosed spaces and uncertain threats meant danger. But they forced themselves forward. Something moved in the shadows ahead. Disguise flickered for a moment as their logical processors struggled with the conflicting data. They knew, intellectually, that this was entertainment, but their sensory systems registered a potential threat approaching. The thing in the shadows lunged forward with a terrible scream. The entire team reacted. Soft Whisper shrieked telepathically, nearly knocking out the team's mental communication. Doctor froze completely, their crystalline structure momentarily visible through the failing disguise. Calculated 17 escape routes simultaneously, grabbed onto the nearest wall, heart rate spiking to dangerous levels. The creature was a human in costume and makeup. The team's rational minds knew this, but knowing and feeling were different things. The actor moved on to scare the next group. The team stood in the corridor, trying to recover. "Status check," managed to say. "Functional," reported, though their voice shook, but that was extremely unpleasant. "We should leave," Doctor said. "We've experienced enough to understand. This is clearly harmful." But Soft Whisper held up one appendage disguised as a human hand. "Wait, listen." Through the mental link they shared what they were sensing from the humans around them. Yes, the humans were afraid. Their fear was genuine, but underneath and around that fear was something else. Excitement, anticipation, and strangest of all, something the translation came back as fun. "They're enjoying this," Soft Whisper said with wonder. "Right now, while being afraid, they're also having fun. Both emotions exist simultaneously." A family of humans pushed past them, a parent holding the hands of two small children. The children were clearly nervous but also excited. When another actor jumped out, the children screamed and then laughed, gripping their parents' hands while smiling. The young ones observed. They're learning this behavior young, fear and enjoyment together. The team continued through the haunted house. Each room brought new scares. Creatures lurched from dark corners. Loud noises erupted without warning. Floors tilted unexpectedly. The combination would have been considered psychological torture on most civilized worlds. Yet the humans kept going. More than that, they seemed to thrive on it. In one room, a human man dressed as a serial killer approached with a prop chainsaw that made terrifying sounds. The team panicked again, but a group of teenage humans next to them laughed and deliberately moved closer to the actor, daring each other to get nearer to the perceived threat. "They're approaching the danger source," said with disbelief. "Every known psychological model says organisms move away from fear stimuli. These humans are moving toward it." By the time they exited the haunted house, the team was exhausted. Their stress readings were far beyond safe levels. They needed medical intervention and psychological counseling. But they'd also seen something remarkable. As they emerged into the evening air, they watched the humans who'd gone through with them. Those humans weren't traumatized. They were energized. Groups of friends talked excitedly about which parts scared them most. Couples held each other close, laughing about their reactions. The family with young children discussed their favorite rooms while the children begged to go through again. "Again," said quietly, "they want to experience it again." The team returned to their ship and spent hours reviewing the data and their own experiences. Medical scans showed elevated stress hormones across all team members, but also something unexpected. After the initial fear response, their bodies had released chemicals associated with achievement and satisfaction. It was subtle, nothing like what the human scans showed, but it was there. "Our bodies rewarded us for surviving the fear," Doctor realized. "Even though we knew rationally we were never in danger, some part of our systems registered survival and felt positive about it." "But it was much stronger in the humans," added. "Their biochemistry appears specifically adapted to extract pleasure from fear experiences. This isn't a disorder. This is a feature of how they're built. Over the next 2 weeks, the team expanded their investigation. They observed humans watching horror films at home, telling each other ghost stories, playing games designed to frighten players, and riding roller coasters that simulated danger. The breakthrough came when they interviewed a human named Sarah. She was a writer who specialized in horror stories and had agreed to speak with them, believing they were researchers studying cultural entertainment practices. "Why do you write stories meant to scare people?" asked. Sarah smiled. "Because fear is fascinating. It's one of our strongest emotions, and when we experience it in a safe environment, we get to explore it without real danger." "But why would anyone want to explore fear? Isn't the goal to avoid it?" "Not for humans," Sarah explained. "See, we evolved as prey animals that became predators. Our ancestors dealt with real dangers constantly. Saber-toothed cats, hostile tribes, dangerous weather, starvation. Fear kept them alive, but fear is also metabolically expensive. It floods your body with stress chemicals. So our brains evolved a reward system for successfully handling fear. When you're scared but survive, your brain gives you a hit of dopamine and endorphins. It feels good." She leaned forward, warming to her subject. "In the modern world, we don't face those constant dangers anymore. We're safe, relatively speaking, but our brains still have that reward circuit, so we create artificial fears. We get the thrill, the adrenaline, the intensity, but we also know intellectually that we're safe. It's like exercise for our fear response. We practice being brave." "Practice being brave," repeated. "You train yourselves using fear." "Exactly. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. The humans who could handle fear better, who could think clearly while terrified, they survived more often. They passed on their genes. Over thousands of generations, we became really good at managing fear. So good that we can actually enjoy it when we know we're safe." Who'd been silent until now spoke up. "You said you write horror stories. What purpose does that serve?" "Art, entertainment, catharsis," Sarah listed. "Horror lets us confront dark themes in safe ways. Death, loss, the unknown, evil, our own capacity for violence. We can explore those shadows without real harm. Plus, there's social bonding. Sharing a scary experience brings people together. You face the fear as a group and come out stronger." "Social bonding through shared fear," Doctor said thoughtfully. "That's actually quite logical from a survival perspective." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Right. Our ancestors survived because they worked together against threats. Shared fear created tight social bonds. We've preserved that, even though the threats are now fake." The interview continued for 2 hours. Sarah explained concepts the team had never considered. The difference between good fear and bad fear. How horror stories help people process real trauma. The way children use scary stories to learn about danger in controlled doses. The role of fear in testing personal limits and building confidence. "Here's the thing," Sarah said near the end. "Humans don't just tolerate fear. We've turned it into an art form. We've made it beautiful, meaningful, even fun. We take one of the most negative emotions and transform it into something that enriches our lives." After the interview, the team gathered in their ship's common area. "She's right," Soft Whisper said. "I've been reading the emotional resonance from thousands of humans. The fear leads to other positive emotions. Accomplishment, confidence, stronger relationships, even creativity. It's all connected. And it's not harmful," added. "Long-term psychological data shows that humans who engage in recreational fear activities aren't more anxious or traumatized. In some cases, they're actually more resilient than those who avoid all fear-based entertainment." "They're using fear as a tool," said slowly. "Not just enduring it, but actively employing it for psychological benefits." Doctor projected a series of calculations. "I've been analyzing human achievement data across multiple fields. There's a correlation between comfort with controlled fear and success in high-pressure situations. Emergency responders, soldiers, surgeons, pilots. Many of them report enjoying fear-based entertainment. It's as if recreational fear helps them handle real stress better. The team sat in silence, processing this. "We need to revise our report to the Commission," finally said. "Humanity doesn't need intervention. They've developed something remarkable. They've weaponized fear and turned it into a strength." "The Commission won't believe us," Soft Whisper warned. "This contradicts every established psychological principle in the galaxy." "Then we'll need to prove it," said. "We need more data, more examples, more evidence. We need to show the Commission that humanity hasn't broken some rule of psychology. They've discovered a new one." Part 3. The emergency session of the Galactic Psychological Safety Commission was packed. Representatives from 60 species had arrived to hear the investigation team's report on humanity. Rumors had been spreading for weeks about the strange findings, and many species were calling for immediate intervention to help the clearly disturbed human population. Stood before the assembled commission, their team beside them. They could feel the weight of expectation in the chamber. Everyone expected them to confirm that humanity needed help, that the fear-seeking behavior was a disorder requiring treatment. "Commissioners," began, "our investigation has revealed something unprecedented in galactic psychology. Humanity does not suffer from a disorder. Instead, they have evolved a unique relationship with fear that provides significant evolutionary and social advantages." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several representatives shifted in their seats uncomfortably. "That's impossible," stated Ambassador from the caution-centered consensus. "Fear is a negative stimulus. No species seeks negative stimuli for pleasure. It violates basic biological imperatives." "That's what we believe too," acknowledged. "But the evidence proves otherwise. Humans don't just seek fear randomly. They've created complex systems to experience what they call safe danger. They frighten themselves while maintaining intellectual knowledge of their safety. This combination triggers unique neurochemical responses that benefit them psychologically and socially." Doctor stepped forward and projected detailed brain scans showing human neural activity during fear experiences. "Notice the activation patterns. Fear centers light up, yes, but simultaneously, you see activity in regions associated with reward, achievement, and social bonding. Their brains are literally processing fear and pleasure at the same time." "This must be a malfunction," someone called out from the audience. "It's not," responded. "We've analyzed thousands of years of human cultural development. This behavior appears in their earliest recorded histories. It's been naturally selected for. Humans who could manage fear effectively while still benefiting from the warning system survived at higher rates. Over generations, this created a population that can actually derive benefit from controlled fear experiences." Sarah had traveled from Earth to testify. She stood now before the commission, representing her entire species. "Honored representatives," she began, "I understand this seems strange to you, but for humans, fear is a tool we've learned to use. Let me give you examples of how this benefits our civilization." She activated a display showing human emergency responders. "These are our firefighters. They run into burning buildings to save lives. How do they manage the terror of that? Many of them practice by experiencing controlled fear in their personal lives. They watch scary movies. They ride roller coasters. They tell each other frightening stories. This recreational fear helps them build tolerance for the real fear they face in their work." The next image showed soldiers in training. "Our warriors train using simulated fear. We create realistic scenarios that terrify them, teaching them to think clearly while afraid. This saves lives. The fear practice isn't just entertainment, it's preparation." More images followed. Doctors performing emergency surgeries. Pilots handling aircraft malfunctions. Parents protecting children during disasters. In each case, Sarah explained how the human ability to function while terrified made the difference between success and failure. But it's not just practical applications, Sarah continued. Fear brings us together. When humans share a frightening experience, even a fake one, they bond. Friendships are strengthened. Romantic relationships deepen. We use fear to build trust because if you can be afraid with someone and come through it together, you know you can rely on them. A representative from the Serene Coalition spoke up. But surely this causes psychological damage over time. The stress of repeated fear exposure must accumulate. Soft Whisper addressed this concern. We've studied this extensively. Humans who engage in recreational fear show normal or even improved psychological health. The key is control. When humans choose to be afraid and can stop the experience whenever they want, the fear doesn't traumatize them. It empowers them. They prove to themselves repeatedly that they're stronger than their fear. We've seen children as young as 5 years old participating in these fear activities, added. Initially, we were horrified, children deliberately being frightened by their own parents, but we observed carefully. Those children weren't being traumatized. They were being taught confidence. They faced something scary, survived it, and learned they were brave. That lesson follows them into adulthood. The commission chamber buzzed with discussion. Some representatives looked thoughtful. Others seemed deeply skeptical. Ambassador stood again. I still cannot accept this. Fear is meant to push organisms away from danger. This is a fundamental principle of psychology. What you're describing is not just unusual, it's impossible. Then I invite you to examine the data yourself, said calmly. We have hours of recordings, thousands of biological scans, psychological assessments across all human age groups and cultures. The data is clear and consistent. There's another aspect we haven't fully addressed, Doctor interjected. Human art and culture. Their greatest stories, their most valued literature and films often incorporate fear. Horror is an entire artistic genre. Through scary stories, humans explore concepts like death, loss, evil, and their own dark impulses in safe, controlled ways. This provides catharsis and helps them process difficult emotions. Sarah stepped forward again. Let me share something personal. When I was 12, my grandmother died. I was devastated and didn't know how to handle grief. Then I read a ghost story about a girl who lost her grandmother. In the story, the ghost returned to say goodbye. It was scary, yes, but it also helped me understand my feelings. The fear and sadness mixed together in a way that let me process the grief. That's what horror does for humans. It gives us safe spaces to confront darkness. But what about the extreme cases? Asked a representative from the Risk-Averse Alliance. We've seen recordings of humans deliberately jumping from aircraft, climbing dangerous mountains, diving into deep oceans. That's not safe fear. That's actual risk. You're right, Sarah admitted. Some humans seek genuine danger, not just simulated fear. But even then, they do it with training, preparation, and safety measures. They calculate risks. They test their limits. And yes, sometimes humans die doing these things. But we believe the freedom to take risks, to test ourselves against real challenges, is part of being human. We'd rather live shorter lives filled with experiences than longer lives spent in perfect safety. The chamber fell silent at this statement. For many species present, safety was the highest value. The idea of deliberately risking death for an experience was incomprehensible. Let the silence sit for a moment before speaking. This is the heart of the matter. Humans have made a different choice than most galactic species. They've decided that fear, properly used, is valuable. That safety isn't the only goal worth pursuing. That experiencing intensity, even frightening intensity, is part of a meaningful life. But is that healthy? Ambassador asked, sounding genuinely curious now rather than argumentative. By every measure we have, yes, answered. Humans live long lives. Their civilization is stable and advancing rapidly. Their psychological health indicators are normal. They form strong social bonds and report high levels of life satisfaction. They're not suffering. They're thriving. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It was Elder Moss from the Contemplative Order, a a species known for deep philosophical thinking. Perhaps we're asking the wrong question. We're asking if humans are healthy by our standards, but should we impose our standards on them? Elder Moss floated forward. Humans evolved differently than we did. They faced different challenges, developed different solutions. Their relationship with fear is unusual, yes, but only because we haven't seen it before. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it different. Are you suggesting we simply accept this? Ambassador asked. I'm suggesting we learn from it, Elder Moss replied. Humans have found benefits in something we've all avoided. Perhaps we've been too quick to label all fear as negative. Perhaps there are lessons here for us. Felt a surge of hope. This was exactly the shift in thinking they'd hoped to create. There's one more thing, said. With the Commission's permission, I'd like to share a personal experience. The room quieted. During our investigation, I attended a human fear entertainment event. Against all my instincts and training, I experienced what humans call a horror film. I was terrified. Every moment was uncomfortable. But afterward, something unexpected happened. Paused, remembering. I felt proud. I had faced something frightening and survived. For the first time in my life, I understood what humans mean when they talk about being brave. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to face fear anyway. That's what humans do every day in small ways and large. Sarah smiled at. That's exactly right. We're not fearless, we're fearful. We feel fear intensely, but we've learned not to let it control us. The Commission debated for hours. Some members remained uncomfortable with humanity's practices. Others were fascinated. But gradually, a consensus formed. The final report, issued 3 days later, Humanity in Galactic Records. They were no longer listed as requiring psychological intervention. Instead, humans were noted as having achieved advanced psychological resilience through controlled fear exposure practices. The report recommended continued observation but no intervention. More significantly, the report suggested that other species might benefit from studying human fear management techniques. Several species immediately requested cultural exchanges to learn more. 6 months after the Commission's decision, something remarkable happened. The Empathic Collective's own species opened their first-ever gentle fear experience. It was nothing like a human-haunted house. The scariest element was a slightly dim room where recordings played soft, unexpected sounds. By human standards, it was laughably mild. But for the Empathic Collective, it was revolutionary. Attended the opening. They watched as members of their species tentatively entered the experience, nervous and uncertain. They saw those same individuals emerge 20 minutes later with something new in their expressions. Not trauma or distress, but a small sense of accomplishment. They had faced something uncomfortable and survived. It's a start, Sarah said, standing beside at the opening ceremony. She'd come as Earth's representative to this historic moment. It's more than that, replied. My people have spent avoiding all discomfort. We've built our entire civilization around safety and peace, but maybe we've been limiting ourselves. Maybe there's strength in facing what frightens us. Welcome to the human perspective, Sarah said with a grin. Fair warning, though, it can be addictive. Once you start overcoming fears, you start looking for bigger challenges. I'm beginning to understand that, admitted. I've been thinking about experiencing another human horror film, something more intense this time. Sarah laughed. Now you're talking, I've got some recommendations. Across the galaxy, humanity's influence was beginning to spread. Not through military might or economic pressure, but through an idea. The idea that fear didn't have to be only negative. That scary experiences could be valuable. That choosing to be brave, even in small ways, could change how you saw yourself. On Earth, a new attraction opened at the planet's largest theme park. It was called the Cosmic Fear Experience, and it taught willing aliens how to enjoy being scared. The first guests were a group of young empathics from They screamed, they clutched each other, and afterward they smiled. Sarah returned to her home and sat down at her writing desk. She was working on a new novel, a horror story about humanity's first contact with truly cosmic entities from beyond known space. As she wrote, she smiled, thinking about the galactic community's reaction to humanity. They'd been so certain humans were broken, damaged by their relationship with fear. They couldn't imagine that what looked like weakness was actually strength, that humans hadn't just learned to survive fear, they'd learned to use it, shape it, and grow from it. In the story Sarah was writing, the cosmic entities were ancient and powerful, existing outside normal space and time. They destroyed countless civilizations, feeding on the fear those civilizations felt before their end. But when the entities reached Earth, they found something unexpected. A species that not only felt fear but welcomed it, played with it, transformed it into art and bonding and growth. The entities, for the first time in their existence, were confused. Their weapon didn't work on humans the way it worked on everyone else. Sarah titled the chapter she was working on, "The Species That Laughs in the Dark." Because that's what humans did. They faced the darkness, felt the fear, and then they laughed. They told stories about it. They made friends through it. They grew stronger from it. And now, slowly but surely, they were teaching the rest of the galaxy to do the same. Outside Sarah's window, children played in the street. Some of them were human, but others were young aliens whose parents had moved to Earth to study human psychology. The children played a game they called Monster Tag, where one child pretended to be a scary creature chasing the others. They were all screaming, all laughing, all having the time of their lives. Fear and joy together, just like humans had always known it could be. The galaxy was beginning to learn what humanity had known all